Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining. I'm super excited to be here talking about, obviously, a really hot topic right now, which is generative AI. So you have myself and Laura here today hosting the session. We'll do a quick intro to ourselves and jump straight into it, as we do only have an hour today. So I'm Minisha. I've been using generative AI since it was released last year, and I've been obsessed ever since. I now help individuals and businesses realize the potential of AI and automations within their workflows. And I'm here doing this with the Ops Nation today, as before this, I actually spent several years in operations and consulting, and I can see just how impactful this new technology will be for like-minded individuals within this network. So I'll hand over to Laura quickly to also do a quick intro to herself, and then we'll get started.
Cool. So I'm Laura, co-founder of Lalo. We produce premium boxed wine. If you've ever been to any Ops Nations conferences or drinks, you might have tried some. I first started playing around with ChatGPT around a year ago and spent a good few months trying to figure out how I could make this useful. It wasn't sort of obvious from the start how it can go from being something that's fun to play around with to something that materially changes how I work day to day. Finally figured out some things a few months ago that have really helped. So excited to share some real life case studies with you later.
Amazing. Great. Thank you, Laura. All right. So for today's session, we thought it'd be a good idea to start with the basics, demonstrating how to use generative AI to improve productivity in your day-to-day work. So for today's agenda, we'll start with how to prompt engineer like a pro using building blocks to create easy to use prompts. I'll then hand over to Laura, who will be walking through live examples of creative ways to use ChatGPT in your business. And finally, we'll touch on what to be aware of with ChatGPT and what you can expect next year. By the end of the 60 minutes, you'll hopefully be able to apply a simple prompting framework to any use case and guarantee better results. Be inspired to use ChatGPT to help you write emails, carry out data analysis, research on your behalf, and of course, be aware of the risks when using ChatGPT and how to manage and navigate them. So let's dive straight into it. Right, prompt engineering, basically a fancy way of saying how to speak to AIs. Now, why is prompt engineering important, right? Why does it get spoken about so often? Well, when describing the importance of prompt engineering, I like to use this analogy. When someone comes up to you and asks you a really broad question right out the blue, how do you usually respond? Most of the time, it's quite a fluffy, long, unstructured answer. And it's the same with ChatGPT. Right? So a prompt is essentially a chain of words, characters, and tokens that tells the language model behind ChatGPT what part of its enormous brain to tap into to generate the output that you're searching for. So just like humans, there's different segments of the language model's brain, which are fine-tuned for various different functions. So that being said, don't overlook the power of prompting, because it can really improve the results that you get. And really, it's the difference between people that have like not so great experience of using ChatGPT versus the ones that use it every single day. So, right. So now I'm sure you've probably seen a ton of these prompting cheat sheets. So how many of you have seen them on LinkedIn, saved them, and actually never gone back to use them? I've definitely done that a lot of times in the past. I think they're a really good source of inspiration, but they can sometimes be limiting, and they don't necessarily teach you the building blocks of prompting, like what actually is it. So I want to show you a foolproof way of creating great prompts for any scenario. So let's get into it with craft. Right, so there's several techniques out there. And because it's such a new concept, it's still being trialed and tested. There's papers being written about it. The other day, I saw something funny, like, you can now bribe ChatGPT with money to make it respond better to you, which is absolutely crazy. But anyways, today I'm going to teach you the building blocks of any good prompt so that you can use this as a foundation to build on for your own use cases. Now, oftentimes, the reason why people get stuck with prompt engineering is because we're so used to operating in an autopilot mode that it can be really hard to articulate to an AI how we think through tasks. So I'm going to show you a simple method that you can use and that I use that allows me to take a step back and structure my thought process in a logical way. So I craft a prompt using the acronym CRAFT, which stands for context, role, action, format, and target audience or target. So each of these, they seem pretty simple, straightforward, but they do warrant a bit of explanation, as you know, in the detail is where you'll find kind of the true value. And just a caveat here, by the way, you don't necessarily need to use all of these together at the same time. And sometimes, depending on what your use case is, it's not relevant to. So I just wanted to kind of mention that before we get into it. All right, so to best explain this craft methodology, I'll showcase these building blocks of the prompt alongside a situation or a scenario that I had with a client of mine. So the situation was that obviously XYZ business is a producer of electric vehicle charging stations and systems. The strategy team are continuously reading the latest reports on key materials and global trends that then inform executives of the business on business strategy. Now, the problem is that this task usually takes a very long time because they're often reading reports and PDFs, which are like 60 or 100 pages long and really, really complicated. And so this manual exercise can take a long time, sometimes a week, sometimes days. And we identified a use case here to use ChatGPT to help summarize these PDFs. So I just want to give you an example of what it could look like. So here's this report from a client of mine. And, you know, as you can see, it's really complicated. It's very boring. You know, you have to pay close attention to a lot of detail in here. And, you know, it's a behemoth of a task to try and kind of summarize this in a concise way to educate other people in your team, right? Okay, cool. So let's go back to this slide. Right, so let's start with context. Okay, so imagine ChatGPT has millions of parameters, and each time you start a dialogue, it literally has no idea where you're coming from. You could be a CFO, you could be a farmer, you could be a cat. It has absolutely no idea. And so you need to provide it context to help narrow down the set of parameters for your specific needs. And that results in a much better output. So what's an example of context? Well, ask yourself, what's the situation? Why are we having this chat today? What's the background of the instruction or action that you're going to give? So let's have a look at, you know, keeping in mind the example that I gave with my client. Let's have a look at the context prompt that I created for this client. So I start off here with a bit of a primer just to make sure that ChatGPT is acknowledging everything that I put. So context here was you work as part of an organization that specializes in the designing and manufacturing of EV charging stations and systems to support them. Here's a description of the business. So I've taken this from the website, which includes, you know, what they do, what they produce. So we offer electric vehicles, station management software, user mobile application, etc. Okay, so I think that's provided quite a good context as to what the business is about, right? So let's move on, right, to role. So moving into role. So I'm sure you've seen many wild examples of this, such as like, you know, talk like Morgan Freeman or talk like Santa Claus. And this role is essentially the actor which you'd like ChatGPT to embody for the output. So there's really no limits to this. The more creative you can be, the more unique and interesting your results will be. So the role plays an important part in your prompt because it sets the level of standard for your output, and it provides a flavor to your output by adapting the language and the style of the writing to the persona that you've assigned it. There's a couple of things that I like to do when putting together the role section of the prompt, which is assigning levels of expertise. So first of all, I define a functional capability, right? So that could be like a content writer, it could be a COO, it could be a productivity expert. I then like to further define this by, defining the expertise within an actual domain. So this could be like, you are a seasoned COO with 20 years of experience in SaaS, right? So it kind of specifies this a little bit more. In addition to this, you can add, additional kind of feedback to the GPT on the tone of voice, the writing style. So for example, you can include, be more cautious, be concise, be descriptive, be casual. And just a little tip here is, to make your output more unique. Say, for example, you're creating content and you want your content to be more unique. Using sentences like "you are known for your unique perspective and as a result are highly regarded by other industry experts." This can go a long way as to, the unique output that GPT can produce for you. So being very specific and upfront, it goes a long way. So let's go back to the example and see what we wrote for role within our example here. So you are a strategy analyst with 20 years of experience within the EV industry. You are an expert in analyzing global trends and building business strategies based on market data, competitor analysis, and up-to-date industry information. You're responsible for producing monthly reports on your findings, which will later be used to inform business decisions. You take a diligent, professional, strategic approach to your work, presenting information in a concise and informative way. So a couple of things here, right? I've emphasized the level of expertise that I want, right? So I'm giving it like 20 years of experience within EV industry. I've then further defined the types of expertise that I want from ChatGPT. So not only is it a expert in being, a strategy analyst, but I've also then mentioned what activities do I want you to be an expert in, right? So by highlighting here, expert in analyzing global trends and building business strategies, it only kind of further enhances the prompt. Okay, cool. So then let's jump into the actions section of the prompt, which is kind of the main chunk of it, right? This is where you'll be actually instructing GPT to do the work. So this is where use cases kind of come into play. What are you looking for ChatGPT to actually do? Is it writing an email for you? Is it creating a project plan? Summarizing a PDF, giving you a breakdown of your monthly horoscope? It can be anything, but most importantly, it's very important for it to be specific. You have to be very specific with what you want to achieve. So these are the key actions that you're looking for ChatGPT to perform on your behalf. Telling it key elements that you want, such as features, column headers, keywords. This is where you would include those types of descriptions within your prompt. Couple of tips here on the instruction from my experience using ChatGPT is when you're designing prompts, try to avoid things like, what not to do, but instead tell it specifically what to do. So for example, don't say something like, do not include semicolons in your message. Do not include full stops in your message. Be very specific as to what you want it to include. And this helps the way that the language model works behind the scenes. Another tip is to be really clear on setting parameters in your instructions. As you know, when you're using ChatGPT, you can sometimes just go off on a bit of a tangent. So having clear parameters in place can help control that. So what I mean by that is, if you know that you want help creating a blog post, for example, that at minimum it needs to be a certain number of words, right? So including the number of words that you would like the output to be really helps in, having a better result. So let's have a look at the action that I created in the example that we're going through. So you have an industry report. Read and analyze each section of the report to identify key pieces of information that would be critical for your team's understanding. The information that you are looking for can include, but isn't exclusive to, key learnings, high-level takeaways, key metrics, areas of focus, trends, opportunities, and challenges. Now, this is like really putting yourself out, in ChatGPT's shoes and thinking, okay, what would I be searching for if it was me? If I were to do this task manually, what would be the items that I'd be looking for? And that's why I've kind of listed them out here. I've also, if you've noticed here, I've said read and analyze each section. This is because, when you're working with a large data set, for example, this PDF, it's really important for ChatGPT to be able to process it properly, right? Oftentimes, I'm sure you've had this happen to you where, it can produce error messages or, produce hallucinations and things like that. And the way to mitigate that is to break your work down into sections. So here you can see run analysis, run the analysis above on each chapters of the report. You can provide your analysis in parts covering one chapter at a time. So this just helps to kind of break down the work and leads to a higher quality output. Another thing that I want to highlight here is, obviously I've included what I would like to see within the output, right? So I've categorized these key pieces of information. However, there might be other things, right? There might be other things that don't sit under these categories. And so I've included here and any other key pieces of information you believe to be relevant. So I've given a responsibility to ChatGPT now to use its initiative to pull together any other insightful pieces of info. Cool. So now we move on to format. Okay, so now you're probably thinking, well, why do we bother with format after already providing ChatGPT with such detailed instructions? Well, I like to think of format as a bit of a subsection to instructions and actions. So ChatGPT isn't just capable of listing tons of bullet points, right? Most people don't realize that it can actually structure text and data in a lot of different formats. So that could be, within a table format, or you could ask ChatGPT to present its findings in the format of a newsletter. And another little tip here is, if you have examples of what good looks like, you can include this within your prompt. So on GPT-4, I'm not sure if it's available on the free version. So much of this, I'd just like to caveat again, I should have said this in the beginning, is that much of this is on the paid version of GPT. So you can add attachments here to the chat, and that will provide ChatGPT with an example of obviously what good looks like, and you can ask it to kind of copy that format. So for the example that we've been walking through, the format that I've asked is quite simple. It doesn't always need to be a really long-winded prompt. It can just be simple sometimes, And so I've asked it, please provide concise summary of each of the sections above, using facts and figures where relevant, using headings and subheadings where possible. So the most important part for the team that I was working with is that the output is factual, and they kind of just want to extract as much useful information from it as possible. And usually for that type of team, it is the facts, the metrics, and the different figures related to the content. So finally, we're going to move on to target audience. So I think this is the cherry on top of the cake. It's a small detail that makes a really big difference. By telling ChatGPT the audience who will be receiving this output, you're adding an extra layer of dimension to the result. And this is because ChatGPT is able to further fine-tune the output to suit the audience that you've identified, right? So for example, if you're creating a blog post, who is the audience that you're trying to reach, right? So make sure, a little tip here is, make sure your target audience is defined according to the level of expertise you want to convey in your content. So I'll show you what I mean here. So if you go down here, I've asked ChatGPT, the output will be presented back to the executive team and strategy team, who will use this information for decision-making on the company's strategy. It's quite a straightforward prompt here, nothing too complicated, but the audience I've highlighted is an executive team. Now, this may not be true, right? Sometimes you're just using it to get a certain quality of output. But this will help inform ChatGPT on, how to format its response even further. So for example, you could probably, in another instance, you could say, for example, you're creating a learning module, and the audience will be beginners. This is where it would be important to include, the audience for this learning module will be complete beginners starting from scratch, and then ChatGPT will then tailor that result accordingly within the content that it produces. So this is where it kind of plays a big role by defining kind of target audience. Right, so now let's actually get into running the actual action. So here you can see I've added the actual PDF here. And I've said, here's the industry report. Confirm that you've read the document by listing the chapters. So I like to prime the GPT step by step. The reason being, as I mentioned before, it can get very easily overwhelmed with lots of information. So I like to confirm that it's actually understanding what I'm doing step by step and not just making stuff up. So you can see here, it's giving me the reports, the chapters within the report. I've double checked them, they're correct. So I know that it actually understands the content of what it's reading. Okay, so now I get into the actual instruction. So based on the context, role, action, format, target audience I have provided, please run the action on the second chapter of the report, which is battery materials overview. So as you can see here, it's kind of use my instructions to break down things per heading, per category that I predefined. It's using facts and it's using figures and metrics within its findings. And what I really liked is that it's given me additional insights. So I didn't ask for this; it wasn't part of the list, but it's given them to me anyway. So it's given me additional insights here, and this is where I think where I've been really impressed with the results of the prompt that we use is here within recommendations. So you can see here that it's talking directly to the strategy team by providing recommendations to them. So it's using words like strategize to capitalize on opportunities, monitor trends on metal price fluctuations, focus on technological advancements, right? So it's using its kind of, I guess, own knowledge to provide some recommendations to the team based off of the prompt that we've given it, right? So this is not something that we asked for. Now, obviously, I've continued on and done this like chapter by chapter. Now, I just want to kind of touch on here. I know this seems like a very specific use case here that I'm showing you, but this doesn't necessarily just need to be applied to a strategy team within an EV market, right? It can be another domain. So for example, you're in sales or sales enablement, you're going to meet a big client to close a deal, but you want to know all the ins and outs of the business of the client and the industry of your client. So what do you usually do, right? You're usually reading white papers or downloading annual reports from the client's website and running a similar type of analysis, which helps you prepare. Or you're a thought leader, right, in a particular topic. And you need to digest and go through many reports like this to keep ahead of trends. So this is just kind of obviously one use case here, one very specific use case, but it can be used in multiple different ways. And I hope that the methodology that I've used here provided some insights and inspiration for you going forward. I also kind of just want to touch in the next 2 minutes on taking this a step further. So I won't be able to show you because we don't have enough time, but you can repurpose or take your outputs from ChatGPT one step further by, for example, if I have this output and I decided, okay, I want to actually put this information in some slides. I want to present this back to the exec team within some slides. How can I do that given that there's so much information? So you can use ChatGPT again to give you a bit of a skeleton as to, how can I present this information within slides, keep them within 10 slides and, give me a basic outline. So I'll just quickly show you what that could look like here. So this is something that I did earlier. where it's giving me, titles, it's giving me points to include per slide. It's included facts and figures. Every slide is kind of slightly different depending on the topic. And that's great. And then you can take it even a step even further by using ChatGPT's data analysis, right? So, for example, that this report has so much, data and insights within it, and you want to visualize that. You can ask ChatGPT to visualize that by, extracting the key data visuals that you're searching for, and creating like specific graphs and charts from them. So apologies that this last bit is slightly rushed, just in the interest of time, but I hope that kind of shows you the possibilities and how you're able to layer GPT. So without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand over to Laura, who's going to talk about some exciting applications of ChatGPT within her business.
Cool. Share my screen. Great. So a couple of weeks ago, Minisha asked everybody on Slack, what type of things are you interested in learning and using to apply ChatGPT to? And two main things came out. One, company comms, and two, data analysis. So I've got some real world examples for both of those things today. I'm going to deal with comms first because ChatGPT, first and foremost, is a language model. You might have heard the word LLM banded around, large language model. Essentially how it works is predicting what the next word is going to be. So, it's originally designed for chat, for comms. Asrina asked everyone if you use 3.5, which is like the standard plan, or the 4. Not everyone's responded, but it looks like it's sort of roughly 50-50. So if you pay $20 a month, you get more options here. 3.5 is great for the basic everyday stuff, the language stuff. But if you want to do more, such as image generation, which is DALL-E, browsing the web for up-to-date information or analysis, you really need to have ChatGPT for the $20 a month. Cool. So I suppose going back to what I touched on earlier about how a year ago when I first started playing with this, I thought, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, it feels really powerful, but I don't really know how to use it in a way that's actually useful and is actually saving me time rather than writing like wrap versions of investor updates, which is fun, but ultimately not very useful. And as we've learned today, that the way you get a quality output is really investing the time in a quality input. And so often I was spending so long like writing prompts. I'm like, oh, okay, well, I might as well have just done this myself, right? And it was hard to, feel like this is something that's actually going to save me time. So an exercise that I did that might be helpful for everyone here is it was a good exercise to do anyway, but like I literally tracked every task that I was doing day to day. And I tried to find buckets of things that ultimately were very similar so that I could create a prompt that I could edit in a light touch way that I could then apply to lots of different things. And one thing I touched on was meeting notes. So, all day, every day, I'm having these meetings, I'm taking rough notes in Notion. I then get back to my desk, I tidy them up, I find the actions, I add them to my to-do list, I share summaries with people, and essentially that's the same task but reused for different things over and over again. So a great candidate for creating a prompt that's actually going to help me with that. So what I've got here is an example of my meeting notes for a monthly meeting that we have with our wine consultant. She is a master of wine. She's super technical. She's super well connected. So the kind of notes that I take in these meetings can be quite technical. Wouldn't necessarily be super easy for anyone to look at these and know exactly what I'm on about. We're talking about a trade show and some wines that she's tried. You can see that I've got some typos in here, so I wouldn't want to go straight back to the desk and share this with everybody. There's some technical stuff, probably doesn't mean anything to anybody who's not in wine. And then we're talking about a new fitting partner that we're looking to work with. So I'll show you the kind of prompt that a lot of people are using, and I'll show you in 3.5 first. So this is the basic version of ChatGPT. So here are some meeting notes, provide a list of actions and create a summary. So another mindset shift that really helped me with using this in a very useful way is thinking of ChatGPT like being an intern. So someone who is competent, but doesn't necessarily have a lot of context or nuance or know exactly how it is that I like to work. So, would you expect someone to pick up these technical notes and create something that's exactly what I've got in my mind? Probably not, but let's see how it does. So this is what it's come back with. Summary of monthly meeting. It's fixed my typos. It's got, most of the important stuff in there. It's fine. It's what, an intern would have done. And then I've got a list of actions, 12. Is that how I would have presented them? Probably not. But this is pretty powerful stuff. It's pretty interesting that, there's even something that can do this. Let's see how it compares to put this in ChatGPT 4. So the first thing you'll notice is that ChatGPT 4 is a bit slower. So it generates almost instantly on 3.5. On 4, it does take a little bit longer because it's a more powerful model. But first up, the formatting looks a little bit nicer. It's bolding, it's laid out quite nicely. Got my meeting summary. So, this is great start, but obviously we can do so much better based on everything that Minisha has talked through this morning. So this is the kind of prompt that I will use day to day. So sorry, I'm just pulling up the chat in case anyone says anything. Sharina, please shout if I miss anything. But definitely let me know sort of as we go through any thoughts you've got, anything you do to make it better. So context, first up. We are a premium boxed wine startup and have a monthly meeting with our wine expert freelancer. She supports us with XYZ. If I was handing this task to an intern, it would be polite to share that kind of information. So obviously, it's really helpful for this model to know that too. Going back to what I said about being able to repurpose these prompts for different scenarios, in here, I'll keep the same information about who we are. Maybe I've made that more detailed. And I can just edit. This is the weekly meeting I have with my accountant, and I can reuse it. If you do want to start seriously using ChatGPT for work, I'd recommend keeping a prompt library. So I've got a sheet on Notion that every time I do something and I'm happy with the output, I'll save it down in there, and then I can reuse it again in future. So I'm not constantly rewriting prompts over and over again. Sounds obvious, but that's I've found really helpful. Next up, the role. So you are an experienced executive assistant who is an expert at taking rough meeting notes and making them actionable. Now, I love that bit in there because ultimately, you don't have a meeting just as a FYI, we can do that in Slack or whatever. Having a meeting is for making decisions. It's for going away and doing something different afterwards. So it's really important to me that actions come out of the meeting notes. Your summary should be clear, concise, and tailored to the specific needs of the audience. Now that will come in helpful later when I'll show you what tasks I'm giving it. Next stage is the instruction. You will be supplied with the raw meeting notes from the monthly meeting. I'll ask you to provide summaries in a number of different formats appropriate for different audiences. If you are not clear, please ask for clarification. This is something else that I really like putting into prompts because there's definitely been times before where my intern has just made a best guess. And I suppose if you were an intern, maybe you would if you didn't know that your boss wanted you to ask for clarification. If you do that, rather than giving you junk, it will ask you and give you a much higher quality answer. So I'm now going to ask it to do 5 things. So it's quite a lot all in one go, but ChatGPT 4 can handle it, which is great. So let's see how it does with creating a detailed summary, which I can share with the project team on Slack. So, as you can imagine, that group is going to want to know the detail. They, basically want all of the information, but in an easy to read and well formatted format. Create a list of actions for our team, including the name of the person to do it, if applicable. Create a list of things that the consultant will follow up with us on. So that's something that I've added in fairly recently, because we'll keep track of our own to-do lists, but often someone will go away, say they're going to do something, maybe they haven't prioritized it or they've forgotten or whatever, and it really holds you up. So I like that this can give me a way to track what other people are going to do too. Create a 50-word summary for the management team about progress this month, next steps and blockers. So summarizing these notes is going to look very different for different audiences, the project team and say the management team. So let's see how that works. And then this is an interesting one as well. Create a one-liner to go into this month's investor update. So can you get the nuance that I don't want to tell my investors about stuff that's going wrong? You know, I want it to be positive in tone and honest, and let's see how well it picks up that tone. So let's go. Well, firstly, let's paste in the actual meeting notes. I did once not paste them in, and it just made something up before I added in that line about clarifications. So serious hallucination, imagined a meeting that I didn't even have. So how is this going to do? First up, the detailed summary for the project team to share on Slack. So this is well laid out. We've got nice bolded lines, definitely looks a bit nicer and clearer than my notes. Oh hello, regenerate, going down on here. I was thinking when I was practicing this the other day that people always say never work with children or animals when you're doing something live, and I definitely think AI is going to be added to that list, because you just never know what it's going to do. Right, so another interesting point actually that's come out of that little mistake is that you'll see that it hasn't generated exactly the same thing this time around when it's generated. So each of these models has an element of randomness in it, so it's not totally deterministic and, you know, spew out the same boring thing every time. Like, it's that randomness that creates the creativity. And you'll see that the format is actually different from before. So going back to writing really precise prompts, if I liked that format before of like bolded headers and, you know, bullet points underneath, you know, I should tell it that, because otherwise it, you know, can do different things every time. Action list for the team. So this is good because it's put people's name against it. It's telling Alice that she needs to do these things, these things, these things. Again, maybe this would have been nice to have, like, you know, separate bullet points under her name. Some important context that I would give it next time I'm iterating this prompt is Clem is actually the name of the consultant rather than someone on our team. So by using this a lot, you'll sort of start to notice what you know, context you teach your intern. You can just edit into the prompt, and then it's there ready to use again next time. 50-word summary for management. This month we did XYZ. Great. You know, I read that and I think, actually, maybe is that how I would have written it? Maybe I would have put it in bullet points. Again, go back and edit it. It's an iterative process. And then an investor one-liner, expanding our wine selection with promising options from Ernesto and Bordeaux, refining technical processes and actively collaborating. Great. So one reason why I add this in to my meeting note prompts is that I get to write the investor update at the end of the month. I think, oh God, what did we even do? But I've got this little update on this project. So right now I'll just save that down into my Notion working doc for my investor update. And you know, it's there ready as inspiration when I come to write it, so that writing that investor update takes half the time because ChatGPT has started to collate all the information for me. So there's quite a few sort of subtle things within that are kind of ways of working that have changed over time, and it was quite hard to figure out what those things were because, you know, you sort of learn the technical aspects, but then you think, like, okay, well, actually, how is that going to save me time? But you know, the main takeaways from this would be figuring out what tasks are actually quite similar so that you can really invest in a prompt and use it for multiple different things. And then figuring out ways that save you time, such as, you know, I'm noticing that I'm chasing other people because they haven't done what they said they're going to do quite a lot, or I'm spending ages writing the investor update because I can't remember what we've done by the time that I'm frazzled at the end of the month. So sort of solving those kind of, you know, productivity challenges, I suppose, into how I am working with ChatGPT. So hopefully that was helpful and answered some of the questions that people had on comms. I think it'd be really interesting to see in the chat if that's given anyone inspiration. How, what tasks do you think that you're doing that actually ultimately are quite repetitive and that you might be able to come up with a task for? I've just seen the note about the prompt. I'm happy to share that with everybody to go away and adapt. But yeah, hopefully that answered people's questions on comms. So if we are happy to move on to data analysis, I've got 5 minutes, so it's going to be pretty brief. I was going to say prompt, but pretty brief. Talk about prompts a lot. So what I want to show you here is some results from a survey that we did back in 2020 when we launched our very first product. So old data, but what I would have done at the time, because we didn't structure the survey super well in terms of, giving people fixed answers, it was all kind of free text boxes. I would have gone through, and when I'm trying to find out where people buy their wine at the moment, I'm turning each of these bits of data into something that I can then analyze. Or, what wine would you like us to source for you? There's loads of different ideas in here, but it was quite a lot of faffing to be able to come up with anything numerical. Wasn't the end of the world because there was 60 or so answers, but if I was a large company and doing this for 500 people, obviously it's not viable to be doing that, and it's a great area where ChatGPT can help. There was also a question in here of how likely would you be to recommend Lalo to a friend or colleague, the classic NPS question, and I wrote this formula which calculates NPS. So you look at the number of people that give you more than 9, subtract the number of people that give you 6 or less, and then look at it as a percentage. Now, I would have sat there and calculated that myself, but what I would do these days is type it into ChatGPT. Rather than me type live in the interest of time, I'll just show you the answers I prepared earlier. So I have a data set where column J contains a customer's response to the NPS question. Write a formula which calculates the NPS score. How long did it take me to write that prompt? Like 10 seconds. How long would it taken me to have written the formula myself? A good few minutes. So it's shown its workings. I know that it understands how you calculate NPS. It's calculating the different steps. Bam, it's written a formula. Bish bash bosh. Love using, well, I don't want to get too lazy and never write Excel formulas before, but from now, but it is certainly really helpful for just little things where you're like, oh, actually it'll be easier for my super smart data intern to do that for me. So one thing that, especially if you only have ChatGPT 3.5, you don't want to be doing any kind of analysis with 3.5, to be honest. It is a language model, it's not designed for that. So use it to be a co-pilot for the kind of analysis that you're doing in Excel at the moment. ChatGPT 4, however, can do interesting data analysis. And I'm going to show you this example from earlier, and it's interesting because it did it wrong, and I'll show you why, because I think the limitations of this are really important. So I've written this lovely prompt, context. We are a startup producing boxed wine. Here's feedback. I want you to help me come up with a plan. The role: you are a business data analyst who can take raw data and provide accurate, actionable insight. This bit's really important. You think carefully, taking things step by step, and show your workings. So it's far less likely to go crazy if it thinks through step by step, the same way you'd ask your intern, think step by step, don't just rush in. If you're not clear, ask clarifying questions. I will share with you the feedback we've received in an uploaded file. You'll then analyze the data to provide actionable insights. And then I've got my spreadsheet that I've uploaded here, which again, you can only do in form. And the first thing that's helpful to do when you are using the analysis function is ask it to, the same way that your intern would look at the spreadsheet and in their head they'll be trying to figure out what does this data mean. First thing you do is look at the columns, get the lay of the land. So ask your intern, like, give me the names of the columns in the file, start getting your head around it. Then what do I want it to source next? So important context. Sorry, the question I'm asking it is, I want to know what wine we should source next. So I've got this column here that says precisely that. What wine do you want us to source for you? And when I did this yesterday, it produced a really nice output where there was Malbec at the top, which was correct, and Bordeaux and whatever. And then today when it did it, going back to what I said earlier about this like element of randomness, it included like random words that weren't wines. And what's interesting here is that it realizes that there's a problem with the data extraction. So I think that's sort of super smart that it can do that the same way, I suppose, that your intern would. And then it had another go. But then I had an idea of, well, actually, it was certainly better the second time round. If I'd have run it a third time round, it might have got there. But then I thought, well, what would help this intern, right? I suppose it'd be helpful for them to know what kind of answer I'm expecting it to give. So I asked it, in a separate chat, but I said, here are the top 30 wines. How many of these are mentioned? So a good way that you can kind of, if you're finding that it's not quite doing what you wanted to do with data analysis, feeding it a little bit more information can really help. And then it, came up with a sensible answer. So I think with the analysis side, like it's not quite doing, I think, what we would all want it to do just yet. So there's a few sort of like hacky things that you can do to try and get the output. There is a plugin for Google Sheets, which I found to be really, really helpful, because rather than asking it to do all of these things in one go, you have a cell where you can basically like write the prompt. So what I would do here is, write my prompt, do something like equals prompt, whatever, extract the name of any particular wine mentioned in cell I2. So it would run a prompt for each of these individual cells, which then you can analyze afterwards. So there's always kind of like hacky works around. But that would be enough to talk about for a whole hour. So hopefully there was a couple of nuggets in those couple of minutes that was helpful for people. But I am helpful. I am happy to be helpful. So if anyone has any questions following the session, you can find me on the Ops Stories Slack, and I'll be happy to do what I can to help. So now back to thank you, Ashrina. Now back to Minisha, who's going to talk you through data security, and some other bits and bobs. There you go.
Thanks, Laura. That was very insightful and that you were very helpful. I'm glad that you touched on ChatGPT's limitations, because it definitely has them. It's not quite the perfect tool yet. And I'm going to talk about a couple of topics here. Let me just share my screen again. Perfect. Let me know when sharing.
Yeah, cool. Got it.
Amazing. Yeah. So, I mean, there is some things to be aware of when using ChatGPT. And I did see a comment within the chat about one of these topics, right? So there's a couple of things to be aware of, and that are what most people are concerned about when using ChatGPT, and that is hallucinations and data privacy. So hallucinations. So we had a question about this and how to prevent them. So if anybody's kind of new to the concept of hallucinations and what it actually is, so it's when large language models generate inaccurate and fictional information that can often sound very convincing, but lack factual basis. And obviously, this poses quite a significant problem for businesses relying on these models for content creation or anything that is being shared externally. Obviously, it can lead to misinformation, damage credibility, and misguide customers. So in terms of how to manage this, although it's not, you can't completely, mitigate any of this, unfortunately, because it's still new, it's still adapting, right? But there are things that you can set in place, parameters that you can set in place to safeguard you. So first of all is, I gave a couple of tips within the chat, which is that have worked well for me. First of all, it's doing things in small chunks. So what I mentioned before is when it's analyzing big chunks of information, it can get completely overwhelmed. So start with small chunks of information. Second of all is you may have heard of kind of few shot. It's called few shot prompting. It's a prompting technique. And you can use that in combination with examples. So, for example, you give ChatGPT a prompt, and then you follow up with examples of what success looks like. So, for example, if you're asking it to do a calculation, and you have examples of how that calculation has been run successfully on, say, for example, different numbers, it can use that as a reference to use the same methodology and same formula to apply to the original question that you've asked it. So other things that you can do, I guess, to safeguard around hallucinations is fact-checking, verifying. So making sure that, say, for example, you ask for a particular metric from a document, make sure that you go in and fact check, make sure that it's correct and it aligns up. If it doesn't, then tell the GPT that it's incorrect, and reiterate that process until it does get it correct. And just cross-reference with trusted sources. So if you're asking GPT to find you, key metrics or figures or information from the internet, oftentimes it can hallucinate with that as well. So just making sure that you're cross-checking the sources and the references that it's linked. And it will do that by, I'm not sure if you've seen it here, but you can see here it's given the reference, so you can go into it and actually check. And this is really helpful for when you're using it to scan the internet. And then, of course, apply your human common sense as well, just at the end. Another concern is around data privacy, right? So a lot of organizations that I've spoken to are quite hesitant on using ChatGPT. It kind of sits on the spectrum. Some people are they don't want to use it at all because they're scared about the privacy concerns, stuff, how it will be using customer data, etc. And then others are just, let's just use it kind of wherever and learn from our mistakes. So it is a big concern, especially because ChatGPT and OpenAI doesn't have any kind of guardrails around sensitive information or how to protect customer related information, unless you have an enterprise account. So everything that you put into ChatGPT will then be used to train ChatGPT. And Laura showed a good example earlier on of anonymizing personal details within when you are feeding ChatGPT this sort of information. Other things that you can do to safeguard is making sure that you delete your chat history. That will prevent it from kind of saving that information and using it later on. And just as a general, maybe start having a conversation with your team or your business, who is using ChatGPT, how are you using it, what stance should we take when it comes to, customer related actions and tasks, and just have an open and honest conversation to know where you stand with what you can do and what you can't do with it. So that covers that. I know we've only got a couple of minutes left, so I just want to touch on what we'll be covering next, hopefully in the new year. So there was some excitement in the chat around automations and things. So this is one of the topics that is quite overlooked within the whole sphere of generative AI, is the combination of applying automations with AI and how it can level up your business. So that's something that I'm really keen to talk about next year, do a workshop on. It probably will be a little bit longer than this, a bit more intensive and personalized to people that are joining. But there's also other topics that I'd like to cover as well, which are applying ChatGPT to a business area. So I often do workshops where I'm working with a team within marketing or within sales, and we'll be kind of walking through use cases for them and how to apply generative AI to those use cases. And then, of course, how to create your own custom GPT as well, which is quite a fun, easy task to do. And the sky is your limit with this as well. Some really fun, cool stuff that I've seen. GPTs that can create you a customized Spotify playlist, by just typing in the command. So yeah, there you have it. So thank you all so much for your time today. Thank you for coming in to join us on your lunch break. And I look forward to keeping in contact next year. If you have any messages, obviously drop me an email or drop me a message on Slack. And likewise with Laura, I'm sure she'd love to hear from you guys as well. Thank you.